Today we're back at Ducati Centre Oakville for yet another unboxing. And this time it's with the all-new redesigned Panigale V4S, which is a super highly anticipated bike, not only by the internet, but also myself included. So the last time we did this, it was for the Ducati Diavel Bentley collaboration, which was a super cool bike, very rare. Make sure if you haven't seen that video, check it out. We'll link it below. And I thought that that was gonna be my most rare bike of the year. And I guess the Panigale V4 isn't super rare, but being that this is the first one I've seen after the redesign and I've been seeing it sort of blowing up on the internet, I think it's gonna be pretty much as exciting as that Diavel video. Already it's a little different than the Bentley video because the Bentley video had more like a wood crate that it was in. And with the Panigale, it's cardboard on top of like this metal cage that requires, again, some disassembly. We have some accessories here that's taped and suspended for the long journey that it got here from Italy, which is always interesting how they pack these bikes to make sure that they're safe and sound. And already I'm seeing a few things that I'm super excited about. Okay, so now that we've sort of gotten a few of the things out of the way, the bike is starting to take a little bit of shape. So you can already start to see some of the body lines and some of the differences. I know I don't have the previous generation V4 right beside this, but you can already start to tell a little bit of the difference. And even more importantly, those new front fins that are on the fairing itself, instead of coming separately and being attached, it comes right from the factory like that. So let's get the rest of this crate sort of out of the way and I'll do a bigger deep dive into the bike itself. Okay, so now that the crate is out of the way, this is the part that I'm most excited about, and that's the sort of unveiling of the bubble wrap. Okay, the good news is we did this without scratching it, and I'm already liking a lot of the things I'm seeing. So the side profile of the bike is going to be one of the biggest changes to that previous model. As you can see, there's a lot more body here, like a lot more fairing, with a little bit more edgier, sharper lines. Like especially when you look at things like the side venting on both the top and the bottom, it is a whole lot more fairing and a little bit less aggressive edges, I would say. I do really like it. I'm also a big fan of the old design. So, you know, it's sort of like to each their own. A couple of the things that I read about on the internet, and I'm gonna try for the first time, is I'm just gonna give this a little twist. So yes, exactly what I heard about. They got rid of the little bit of a slop that grip had. So on my Panigale V2, when I rotate that throttle a little bit forward or backward, there's a little bit of slop there. They have dialed that in and it's totally tight now. Now, when my friends make fun of that slop on my V2, I always say, oh, it's just to give you a little bit of, you know, some damper, or, you know, when you're in a corner or it's a track bike. I was wrong. I was just probably making up excuses, and they've definitely gotten rid of that for sure. One of the bigger appearance upgrades is these front fins that you have, these front spoilers. I do really like them up close. In fact, there's more to them than I first read on the internet. There is actually a little bit of a body line there, so they probably are still detachable. However, they do look a lot more integrated than the last one. And sort of that's what I would call the theme of this bike, because even the headlights themselves, a lot more integrated. If you remember on the previous Panigale, those headlights were a little bit recessed in and they had sort of like an intake vent right beside them with the daytime running lights at the top. These seem smaller actually when you first look at them, and that's just for that sleek look. And the whole bike itself seems a lot thinner and a little bit more athletic. And when the Ducati designers were under a little bit of that criticism of this new bike and the new design, how it doesn't have, you know, the single-sided swing arm, not a lot of people know. This bike was actually designed two ways for this redesign. One with a single-sided swing arm and one with the dual swing arm like you see here. And what Ducati did was they took all of their MotoGP drivers and test riders and every rider that they could get their hands on to the track in Italy, and they rode both bikes around the track and said, which one do you like better? And the winner was the double swing arm. I don't know the actual term for that. I'm probably butchering it. And it was the double swing arm because the way that the bike is designed itself is having that single-sided swing arm meant an inconsistent cornering depending on angle, power delivery, things like that. But with a perfectly balanced bike like this one with the 2 swing arms and that engine perfectly in line, those riders were able to push it a little bit further. Speaking of pushing it a little bit further, with this new redesign, there's over 70 sensors for things like power delivery, wheelie control, all of those things to make sure that this is an absolute track monster. In fact, critics are saying that this is going to be the best track bike in the entire world, going up against some really high hitters like the BMW S1000, like the Aprilia. All of those bikes are just getting absolutely mopped around the track with this new redesign. So depending what kind of rider you are, maybe you can sacrifice a little bit of those visual features like the single-sided swing arm, like the big bulky fairings, if it means you're gonna be lapping those BMWs around the track. I don't know, it just depends on what you use it for. Okay, getting into a few of the other differences, we now have this really nice Brembo brake setup. This one obviously has the adjustable suspension, being that it's the V4S, which is one of the higher end, more athletic versions of the bike. Another interesting design language that I'm noticing is this gap here. There is a really huge space between that front tire and things like the radiator and just the rest of the fender fairing and stuff like that. I'm sure a lot of that is not just for aerodynamic, but also cooling because we don't have those inlets on the front headlights anymore. So a lot of the air is going to be underneath that front fairing, as like it's acting almost like a scoop. In fact, I can even put my hand in there and feel the actual air intake. That's so huge, I just fit my whole hand like this in there and my arm a decent amount up in there. So again, that front fairing is not just for looks, it is for use and for high performance racing. And it's kind of just like a big open mouth, taking all the air in there for the intake as well as the radiator. Looking at the side, as I've already mentioned, so I can tell that it's very, very different from the last one. Even this gap here is probably mostly for looks, however, it does give it a little bit of that Panigale. We have that crankcase cover, which probably before we know it, we'll see some clear ones of those. To each their own when it comes to the clear ones. I really like the look of it. However, I have heard that, there's a reason that they're not clear from the factory. Then we see a little bit of gadgetry, heat shield, which is like a harder textured plastic, exhaust at the bottom. I did price out an Akropovic exhaust for this bike because it boosts the power a little bit and gives it a nice sound. Still, it's gonna cost someone anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000, depending on if you're in the States or Canada, but probably worth the money if you're already spending this much money on a bike. Also, we have a little bit of the built-in sort of like side tank grips and just, again, a thinner sort of frame to be able to have that rider tuck in a little bit nicer. Then we get to the back, which is the most controversial part of this bike, as I mentioned earlier in the video, and that's that swing arm. So we have that dual-sided swing arm with that, again, big brake at the back. And when you get up close to it, even the metal itself is a little bit different than I was expecting. So it has a little bit of that cast iron texture to it, I would say, and it's almost like a gray. So most of the accents on the bike are either, red, black, gray, or bronze. The rest of the frame is that same gray. So you can kind of sort to appreciate the different elements that go into this bike just based on the color. Pretty much anything black is gonna be that soft plastic piece. Anything gray is gonna be that frame. And then anything with that bronze is the engine, except for the exhaust, that's like a silver. And a little bit different of a wheel design setup. Now, one thing I did notice is when I'm standing here, even though the bike itself seems more athletic and a little bit slimmer, when you stand at the bike and sort of face down, it looks really skinny at the back, but then as it gets to the front, it has that muscle to it. It has a little bit of that aggressive, big shoulder stance that I always like to see in both sports cars and in bikes. And it's funny because in a sports car, you would see that more towards the rear of the car. Like the Lexus LC500 is really skinny at the front and then really big at the back. And with a super sport bike like this, you sort of see it a little bit differently where it's a little bit skinnier at the back and then again, a little bit muscular up towards the front where the engine and those things are. Another thing that I saw is this is one of the biggest screens that Ducati has had, and it's totally redesigned. As I mentioned, there's like 70 sensors in this bike to be able to control all those different systems, and that screen is going to do a lot of that for you. So all your different drive modes, a really high definition color display that's, you know, customizable for what you see, different layers of menus, and a whole new way to actually access those layers. So you kind of have everything with your left hand here. So items up and down. In fact, there's 2 rocker switches for doing multiple things. Button-wise, we have our up, down, and select, and then our other up, down, and select. We also have our mode button right here. Our 4-ways is above that. Our flash to pass, and then our signals right, left, and off. Also, I like the little Brembo icon that most people wouldn't even know what that is. However, when you get up close, you can see right on the levers, it's attached, or sorry, it's etched in. Also, speaking of levers, I'm the type of rider that I never change my factory levers. I know all my buddies who ride Repsols and, you know, other CBR 1000s, Yamaha R1s, always switch theirs. I've never done it, but on this one, I definitely would. It feels like I'm, you know, sort of like hanging onto a big piece of metal here, where I know Ducati offers a lot of nice accessory upgrades for things like that. However, the grips themselves, I wouldn't touch. I really like these grips, and I always upgrade my grips from the factory to like the softer ones. These ones are almost already that Ducati accessory grip. So the levers seem a little bit bigger, but the grips seem a little bit softer. Other than that, I don't think I would change much here. We have our sort of just slightly tinted glass, and then obviously a little bit more of that bronze crankcase down on the side. Oh, another thing I noticed, even the kickstand is different. So the kickstand is a totally different design. It seems to be a bigger one, and it has, you know, more of a skeleton look where it has the exposed sort of like little strut that's in it, the little pneumatic sort of thing. And the reason for that is so that when you lean it over, it's not gonna be leaning over as much. It's gonna be standing a little bit more straight up and down. And even like on my Panigale, I noticed my kickstand can be a little wobbly because of so much weight is on it. But with this new athletic design, not only is not as much weight gonna be on it, but if it's standing more upright, then it's not gonna be as floppy either. So that is one of the other things. So one of the details that I've never known what it is until today is this little keyhole behind the seat. And as I was looking at the seat, it is a really nice grippy material. But the keyhole behind it, I assumed, was for the seat itself to be able to lift off. However, it's actually just to remove this little plastic bit, which inside is where you're gonna be able to access the access port for things like servicing or tuning or whatever. That's all this key does. And to remove the seat itself, it's actually just screwed there. So that was interesting. You can't really put anything in here storage-wise, but it is a good spot for plugging in, I guess you could say. So one of the things that I love about filming at Ducati Centre Oakville is it's also a Lotus dealer. So there's always these cool Lotus Amiras around, which come in a lot of cool colors. You can see a couple different versions of gray, some red, some blue, and I'm a big blue car fan, so I love the darker colors with like the yellow calipers. Comes in manual, which is super rare for supercars these days, and a very reliable 6-cylinder that sounds amazing, really good power plant, super lightweight sports car, and looks like unlike anything else that I've ever seen. So if you're in the market for a car of this caliper, in Canadian dollars, they start, you know, in the mid 100s, I think around like 140, and is a lot of bang for buck and would definitely turn some heads to get on. The worst part about filming here is that I always want to buy one because I can justify spending that type of money all day for a car of that caliper. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of talking and not enough sitting on the bike. So let's do my first sit. Interesting. Okay, so again, I'm really used to Panigales, not the V4 as much, but I do have a V2 that I've put a lot of mileage on. And it does feel a little bit different. It does feel more athletic, for sure. It feels way lighter. I'd have to compare the specs side by side, but even just throwing it side by side, it's really light. I mean, this one doesn't have any of the fluids. It's at its driest weight for sure. However, still decent upright. I don't feel too much tension on my wrist, which is super important for any rider that's gonna do some serious mileage. I feel like I'm at a good ergonomic position, but at the same time, I could get a little bit lower. My knees feel pretty well together, which is nice. And it definitely doesn't feel as big as the previous generation. I don't know if that's just in my head because of the design language, but definitely a super easy bike to be able to throw around the corners, and has some really nice visual details. Like even looking at the black 3-pack there, super, super sharp. I'm just gonna put it down before I fall in love because I could definitely see myself buying a bike like this. Okay, so there you have it. The all new 2025 Panigale V4S, one of the biggest redesigns that we've seen to this particular model, and it has been on the internet with a lot of controversy ever since the unveiling just a few months ago. But all of that controversy is just about design language. I mean, when you look at the specs on paper, here's a bike that's lighter, faster, more high tech, and everything on this bike has a purpose, including the elimination of the single-sided swing arm. So who's this bike for, and would I buy one myself? Well, here's a bike that's for anyone who is going to take it to the track. Because on the track, with the latest redesigns in styling and sacrificing of things like the single-sided swing arm, you're gonna have an absolute track monster that can mop the BMW S1000R, the Aprilia, anything that the track can throw at it, this bike will be able to do. Would I buy one myself? Well, the answer is always yes. However, side by side versus the previous model, I would have to ask myself the question, do I want the latest high-tech, fastest version of the bike, or do I want one that I know looks good? And I would have to do some serious thinking before making that decision, but I will say in person, even those few styling changes that I was worried about, like the front fins, like the swing arms, in person, it's a whole different bike, and I'm very impressed because sometimes on the internet, you can't tell what a bike is gonna look like, what a car is gonna look like, what any product is actually gonna look like until you get up and see it in person, and I'm very impressed with this one. So, with that said, I'm Dustin Mason. Thank you very much for watching, and bigger thank you to Ducati Centre Oakville for bringing us back in to check out the new Panigale V4S. As well, there will be some more videos like this coming, so let me know in the comments below what you want me to film.